Here we are. We made it. The top 10. Let's get into this.
And now for my next number, I'd like to return to the
Classic. Hey guys, Alex back again with another video, and this time we are finishing off my top 100 my top 100 albums of all time. In case you've missed anything, this is where I have sort of conducted this list of albums that have influenced me I've influenced my music taste over the years that I've pretty much been listening to music. Some albums on this list may be higher or lower than you expect, or some albums that you see maybe shouldn't be on this list. It's all opinion. I loved seeing these top 100 album videos when they were going around, and I still love seeing them when a new one crops up. So if you've got one I haven't seen yet, leave a comment, let me know. But yeah, it's just my opinion. These are albums that have influenced me personally. If you didn't see the last part, or you missed any parts in particular, the playlist, the whole video is in the description below. But particularly in the last part, 20 through to 11, any of those 10 albums could have been in this list, in my top 10. But I just could not do it. I tried to fit them in, but I could only pick 10. These are the 10 that sort of had that bigger influence on me through the years. So let's get into the top 10 here, and I do have something special planned for this video, which you'll see later on. But first, let's get into this. So, at number 10, and the last one, I believe, from my dad's collection. Yeah, it is. My dad was a big fan of Talking Heads, and although this is my favourite Talking Heads album, it's the one that has stuck with me the most, from tracks Burning Down the House, Girlfriend is Better, Slippery People, and even to the closing track, This Must Be the Place. I have never forgotten this album. I have always loved this album, appreciated it for what it was, always loved the cover, and because of this album I listen to Talking Heads, not regularly, unless it's this album, granted, but hey, what can you do? Every Talking Heads album has something good on it. This is just the one that I tend to revisit the most. This and Remain in Light, but I don't seem to have a copy of that. But yeah, Talking Heads, Speaking in Tongues comes in at number 10. A hard spot to put it, because out of all these albums, this and number 1 obviously are the only ones set in stone. 9 through 2 you could rearrange in any order, probably, but this is just what I've gone with for this video. Obviously, I did also forget to mention as well, this list is not set in stone. In a year from now, this list could have changed. Albums could be higher, albums could be lower. I think at this point my top 20 is sort of set in stone, but you never know, that could still change. Number 9, an R&B album, and a modern R&B album to be more specific, Anderson .Paak's Malibu. Yeah, notice how none of his other albums made it into this video, or on this list, if you've tuned in. That's because this album, when it came out, and I was trying to discover something new, like 2016 was the best and worst years of my life, because in 2016 I found that I would discover new things musically. I discovered this, and I was like, oh man. And so yeah, I wanted to grab it on vinyl as soon as I could, and I found one at a good price, picked it up. Every song on here is incredible. Not a bad song on it, really. This is one I have on rotation a lot. Like, if you look at all these albums, in particular these 10 albums, this may be the one I spin, like, out of that. If you were to take the 5 I spin the most, this would be in there. So yeah, Malibu by Anderson .Paak, great album, and definitely one that I think is a classic in the making. It's not just an R&B album. You've got hip hop, you've got jazz, you've got soul, you've got some dancey tracks on here. It really is that incredible, and for that reason, Anderson .Paak's Malibu comes in at number 9. At 8, this one does kill me to put it this low on my top 10, but again, one I sort of had in my teens and then didn't listen to it for a very long time and then rediscovered it later. And I mean, it's just a classic, really. It's Thriller by Michael Jackson, coming in at 8. There's maybe... No, every song on here I love it. Produced by Quincy Jones, of course. Where do I start? Wanna Be Starting Something, Baby Be Mine, Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Human Nature, PYT, my favourite song on this whole album. I love everything on this album, and because of this I love Michael Jackson's music. I love the Jackson 5, and I love 80s R&B. Again, when I was discovering 80s R&B, this was the first thing that I made sure I picked up because I wanted to listen to it. I forgot how great this album was, and from there on out I just started off the obvious stuff and then went backwards to the more obscure stuff from there. But a must-have when it comes to crossovers between R&B and pop. Michael Jackson was the king of pop. So yeah, he's on my list at number 8 because of, well, with Thriller, because of how incredible the album is. Out of all his albums, this is probably the only one where I don't skip any songs because I love every song on it. But that's just me. His other albums maybe have one song on that I'm not too fussed about or skip when I'm not in the mood for it, but every song on this album, I can listen to it all day, every day. Any of these, really. At number 7, another one you guys may question, but that's Bee Gees' Spirits Having Flown. I know, yeah, it's not their most famous, it's not their most popular album, but I like it. It's got Tragedy on it. It's got Too Much Heaven on it. It's got Love Inside Out on it, which is my favourite Bee Gees song. It's got Spirits Having Flown on it. And yeah, everything in between. Great album from Bee Gees, and just one that I always picked up. One of the first albums I picked up from my collection, actually. Not because it was Bee Gees, but for the songs that I liked on the album, and from there I just became a bigger Bee Gees fan because I was like, wow, this album is flawless. So yeah, it blew me away. So I thought it was flawless. I made sure I picked up more from Bee Gees, and it all started with this, my obsession with the Bee Gees. So yeah, Spirits Having Flown comes in at 7, and the reason it's not any higher is because well, just because there's other albums I think are better made, personally, and I've had a much bigger influence than that. Okay, at 6, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Still relevant. Everyone loves this album, and again, flawless. What's Going On, What's Happening Brother, Flying High, Save the Children, God Is Love, Mercy Mercy Me, Right On, Holy Holy Holy, and Inner City Blues is one of the best closing tracks of all time, has one of the best bass lines ever made. So many people have covered it as well, it's incredible. But yeah, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, absolute stellar album. And you know, he has a point. It's appropriate now, more so than ever. Like, that's just how good it is. Marvin, absolutely incredible stuff. And yeah, I can't praise this album enough. I wish I could put this higher, but it suits number 6 for me. Just the only reason it's here is just because I spin it loads. But didn't really have an influence on me. There are other Marvin albums I discovered before this one, but as soon as I discovered this one, I was hooked. And I knew this was going to be the Marvin album I spun the most. That makes more sense, doesn't it? But yeah, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On comes in number 6. At number 5, I sort of mentioned him a bit earlier on in the video, but that's because he produced one of the albums. That's Quincy Jones. This is the dude. The main reason that I love this album is because of, I mean, it features the song Bet You Wouldn't Hurt Me, which does feature Stevie Wonder on the synthesizers, which I discovered for the first time when I read the inserts of this album. But there's just so many guest features on here, from Al Jarreau to Isaac Hayes, Stevie Wonder to James Ingram to Patty Austin, who I think her debut is on this album, maybe. But yeah, like I said, there's just so many guest appearances, and it's so funky, it's so soulful, it's very good 80s R&B, and I always recommend this to people and say, what's a good album from R&B that I must have? Have you got the Dude by Quincy Jones? No, I ain't got that. There you go then. But yeah, no, on a serious note, Quincy Jones is the Dude is an absolute incredible album. I love it. It may be lower on your list. You may not know this album at all, but for me, I was hooked from the first time I listened to it. Absolutely incredible. Can't say enough how much I love that album. At number 4, this one does pain me to not put it higher up on the list, just because it got me into more of the electro side of R&B, boogie funk as it's called. But that's Kashif, his debut. He was originally part of the funk group BT Express, and he went solo and went on to produce so many big hits for like Evelyn Champagne King and Lilo Thomas, and even a lot of his own stuff. But yeah, this is definitely my favourite album from him. It's the only one I can say is perfect from front to back. Well, not the only one, but the first one I would recommend. I Just Gotta Have You, great song. Stone Love, great song. Help Yourself to My Love, great song. Don't Stop My Love, great song. Rumours, my favourite song on here, and it's an album track. So if my favourite song can be an album track from this guy, that's sort of giving you a heads up as to what the rest of the album is like. I mean, I love the rest of the album, don't get me wrong, but Rumours, the first time I heard that, I was like, oh man. Yeah. Kashif by Kashif, absolutely incredible. It's 80s R&B, but it's got a synth sort of sound to it. That's why it, because they use a lot of synths and drum kit and drum pads and things like that. So it was never really popular until later, and because it hit a very specific audience, but synth fans didn't like it because it was R&B and soul fans didn't like it because it had a synth twist to it. So it was never really big. But now that this stuff's making a huge comeback and sort of coming back in fashion, I mean, I've always loved Kashif anyway, but this is one that I can say you'll probably find a bit easier now that it's coming back in fashion, but it'll be a lot more expensive now than it was. But yeah, Kashif by Kashif is at number 4 anyway. And I'm from my favourite band. Yes, my favourite band's not number 1 or number 2. It's painful. I get it. But in my defence, there's 2 more albums that have had a big influence on me, and this album, kind of discovered it later, but still my favourite from this band is Arctic Monkeys' Favourite Worst Nightmare. Brian Storm and Teddy Picker. When those 2 songs came on at the concert, my lord, beers were flying up in the air, mosh pit was in the crowd, people were spitting on each. It was like an old school punk mosh pit. It really was. When those songs came on, whoosh, up goes the beer in the air. And I mean, I was lucky to get out of the mosh pit and still keep my space in the front row, but man, was that mosh pit mad. Fluorescent Adolescent is great. Only Ones Who Know and 505 are really the only 2 chilled songs on here, but they sort of don't really match the atmosphere of this album. 505 does, because it sort of gets a bit more grungy towards the end, but Only Ones Who Know doesn't really match the atmosphere of this album, which is the only reason I can't put it any higher. That song, The Only Ones Who Know, sort of, it's a weird one because it's still my favourite album from Arctic Monkeys, but Only Ones Who Know, the song on here, I kind of can only well, I can only listen to it when I'm in the mood for it. Otherwise, I just skip it. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is still my favourite Arctic Monkeys album. Sentimentally, because it was my first mosh pit. Because of Ryan Storm and Teddy Picker and I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor, which ain't on this album, but still, that was my first mosh pit, and I'll always remember that gig, just like every gig I've been to. Number 2, I don't own this album, but it's at number 2, so here we go. It's the Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem's second major label album, and everything on this album I love. Even with the skits, I think the skits kind of add to it. Normally, I don't like it when Eminem puts loads of skits in his albums. They sort of take it away from me. But man, this album does it perfectly with the balance of the skits and the actual songs. And yeah, it doesn't put a foot wrong for me. You've obviously got songs like Stan, Real Slim Shady, The Way I Am. But this album, Eminem's always had controversial lyrics, and this album really boosted his career. I mean, he elevated with his first album anyway, but this album, it's one of the only albums, I think, one of the only hip-hop albums, I'm sure, to go 10 times or 12 times platinum, whatever it is now. It's mad, but yeah, this album really hit hard, and it hit me hard in a big way, so that's why it comes in at number 2, Marshall Mathers LP. Now, before I reveal my number 1, I'm going to do a little montage here of some of the albums that didn't quite make my top 100, so honorable mentions, technically, so please enjoy that montage.
They do.
Okay, so those were my honorable mentions. I don't know how many albums there were there. I may have done a little. I tried to do 10, but I might have gone a little bit over. But with that all said and done, it's time to reveal my number 1 album of all time. And of course, this is all relating back to my Get Me to 300 subscriber contest, which by the time you're watching this, I think is already finished, possibly. But you guys will see anyway. Now, this is where I reveal my number 1 favorite album to you guys, and this is where you find out if you were right or if you were wrong. Some of you have probably already guessed from looking at the rest of the albums on this list, but yeah, I cannot say there is not an album that I spin more, there is not an album that's influenced me more than Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life, my favourite album of all time. Now, here's some backstory to this. My uncle, again, was a huge Stevie Wonder fan. And I was lucky enough to see Stevie Wonder in concert in the summer of 2019, but my uncle said he always wanted to see Stevie Wonder live. And he always played Stevie Wonder songs to me. Stevie, Otis Redding, Beatles, Joe Cocker. He loved the music before his time, really. And so this was the album that kind of stuck with me the most when I was after rediscovering Stevie. Because I've gone back and forth with what my favourite one is, but as soon as I discovered this one again, I was like, yeah, my uncle played this a lot, and I remember a lot of the songs, and still remembered a lot of the words. Because, you got Love's in Need of Love Today, Village Ghettoland, Set Duke, I Wish, Pastime Paradise, obviously became Gangster's Paradise later on, Isn't She Lovely, Joy Inside My Tears, which is maybe one of my favourite Stevie songs ever. Yeah, it's a great album, and yeah, just absolutely incredible, can't go wrong. And because of my uncle and because of the other influences I've had around me with the soul thing and just getting into soul music, not only was Stevie Wonder my favourite artist ever, but Songs in the Key of Life became my favourite album of all time. And I know it's on a lot of people's top 100s or top 20s or whatever they decide to end up doing, and I know a lot of people, even if they don't like Stevie Wonder or they're just discovering Stevie for the first time, this is the album they will go to. But I can't help but say that this is my favourite album of all time, because it's true. It really is. And yeah, I still listen to it to this day because of my uncle. And yeah, it's the album I definitely spin the most frequently. So yeah, Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life is my favourite album of all time. Some of you may have seen it coming, some of you may have not, but for that reason, Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life is number one. Can't go wrong, really. So that's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this series, or if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know if you enjoyed this series and if there's any other videos you'd like to see me do. I definitely enjoyed filming these. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing them. Subscribe if you're not already. I upload every Wednesday and Sunday with the occasional other additional video every now and again. But just in case you miss anything or forget, then please make sure the bell notification is switched on. That way you never forget. But with that all said and done, guys, thanks so much for tuning into the video, and I will see you again very soon. Peace.